I think used cars will decline a bit in the next 6 months. I don't believe they'll go down all the way to pre-pandemic levels. I think we'll still remain somewhere around that 30 to 50% higher than pre-pandemic levels. So if the average car in 2019 or 2020 was a $20,000 used car, it's now 30. And those cars will probably level out around the $25,000 to $28,000 mark, in my view.
We've seen 4 percentage points worth of rate hikes, and we know that's starting to hurt consumer spending. Is it crimping demand for used cars yet?
Yeah, I think we're actually seeing a shift, and we will see a shift from new to used cars. New cars will still have supply issues, depending on supply chains or even the biosecurity at the ports has caused some issues, and it's quite patchy depending on brands. But yeah, I think there will be a shift to used cars as people start to find ways to save money in the face of inflation and interest rate increases. So I think there will be a shift from a more expensive new car to a relatively less expensive used car.
So are new car prices holding up?
Yes, they are. Currently, they are, and I think on the whole they will. I think most brands are going to try to hold the new car increase prices that they've achieved in the last 3 years. Most of the brands have a strategy to maintain those supply levels and keeping demand and supply matched. But you know, as always, it only takes one brand or one bad player to break the levee, and that'll really start to impact on transaction prices. I mean, we're seeing new cars at 50% higher than the levels they were at early 2020. So I think over time that will normalize. But there's also been new cars have been not in line with CPI for the last 20 years. So I think there's definitely been an increase in prices, but that's been a pent-up increase. It will decline a bit, but that depends on how the brands behave.
It doesn't seem as though sales volumes are slowing. The Federal Chamber of Automotive Industry says it was the best June since 2018. Or is part of it a catch-up from delayed orders now being delivered?
Yeah, so there's lead and lag indicators. So the VFAX information and deliveries are a lag indicator. So a lot of people are taking delivery of vehicles, as you mentioned, that they ordered in 2021 or 2022. And also the tax incentive, we have to remember, for the instant asset write-off finished on the 30th of June. So there was a real push to get as many vehicles into the hands of ABN holders as possible to take advantage of those tax incentives. We will see, I believe, in the next 12 months, a sort of slowdown in volumes, volume sales, according to VFAX. The lead indicator is what's called order right. That's when someone signs a contract to take delivery of a vehicle. And we're seeing some drop in order rights in the industry. And again, it's quite patchy. It depends on brand, depends on location. Yeah, so it's a bit of a very difficult thing to predict. But the lead indicator is that there is some pressure in the market in lines with inflation and interest rate rises. But yet we're definitely seeing the pent-up demand and the pent-up supply issues and all those deliveries happening for vehicles that were ordered in the last 12 to 24 months.
Are those supply delays still there? Are you waiting for a car in the same way you were a year ago?
Yes and no. Again, it's very, very patchy. Some brands have a lot of stock. You could go to a dealership and buy off the lot. And other brands have a lot of issues with their supply chain, and other brands have issues with biosecurity at the ports here in Australia. So it's very different depending on every brand. So it's definitely a bit of a crapshoot. We are seeing in the U.S., which Australia tends to follow, I think their inventory supplies are up 40% year on year, which means the consumer still, on average, will be ordering the vehicle and taking delivery later. But currently, you can still go on the lot, so you can go to a dealer and buy off the lot at a lot of these dealerships.
You mentioned biosecurity issues. Why are there delays at ports in Australia to get cars into the country?
I can't really speak to that in detail, but I do know that for a lot of these vehicles, they had infestations, I believe, of bugs and then dust. The story, as I understand it, the vehicles were produced, and due to shipping delays, were sitting on the port or in a holding yard in Europe or somewhere else in the world. And then when they were put onto the ship, they weren't cleaned properly. So then when they get to Australia, our biosecurity officers have to do all the necessary steps to make sure that nothing gets into the country that shouldn't. And that's caused pretty significant delays, up to 6 months for some vehicles sitting out at the ports and off the shore.
How's the transition to electric vehicles going? Tesla's Model Y was the second best-selling car in Australia in the last financial year, just behind Toyota Hilux.
Yeah, it was significant. There's been a significant increase in EV uptake this year. In the last 2 years in particular, we're currently over 8% here in Australia, which is, when you think about it, it's quite significant. I think once you get past that 5% level, that's the tipping point for anything. So we will see the EV uptake increase as supply increases. So the reason I believe, similar to the June numbers being being the biggest June in volume ever. As the EV supply comes on, all the vehicles that were ordered by customers are now being delivered. So again, from a lag to lead indicator, the lag effect is now taking place. The other bit is the FBT exemption on zero and low emission vehicles has really helped make EVs more affordable when they're salary packaged via a novated lease. So that's been quite important to the uptake.
When it comes to retention or resale value, how do internal combustion engine vehicles compare to electric vehicles, given there's been some battery life valuation issues?
There's not a lot of evidence in Australia at this point. I mean, I think most EVs in the market that are currently on road are probably 5 years or less, as far as age is concerned. In the UK and in the US, we've seen issues with resale values with used cars, in particular batteries. So I think it'll be interesting how that all sort of washes out. I think that's the big unknown from an EV purchase point of view. From a total cost of ownership point of view, it's somewhat marginal depending on how you allocate your running costs if you've got solar charging versus buying off the grid. But the biggest unknown question from a consumer's point of view, or even a fleet's point of view, is what's the resale value? What's at the end of the life of the vehicle? What will I get? And that'll wash itself out over time. But there's not a lot of evidence out there at the moment.
Steve Bragg, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.